Welcome back to another episode of Hacked by Halftime. I am super stoked to have Anthony Cuzimano on with us today, and he is the Chief Evangelist and Director of Solutions Marketing at Object First. Anthony, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Travis. Yeah, like you said, I am a evangelist and director of solutions marketing, but I think more importantly than that, I've been with Object First for over 4 years now. So I was there almost at the very beginning. It's been a really fun journey seeing this company go from when I started, it was 3 employees to now we got acquired by Veeam. I think we were over like 250. It has been a wild ride. And I can now say I've done it all at a startup, and it's something I recommend everyone do once. But it's definitely exhausting.
Yeah, I
The
can only
entire
imagine.
journey.
Because also part of your background, right? You have bylines on dark reading and all of this good stuff. So like you have done it all, really.
Yes. Well, and what's funny is I have no background in marketing at all. In a previous life, I was a software engineer, and I did that for 7 years before I realized I'm a terrible coder, but I'm great at talking about technology and being passionate about it. So I made the jump to something that felt a little more comfortable for me. But yeah, I lots of published pieces, done plenty of sales engineer type demos, you name it, I've done it. I think the only thing I haven't done here is any kind of finance, just because I'm terrible in that. So never point me to a math problem. I won't be able to solve it.
But I think that skill set is so important. Like you said, like bridging the technological capabilities into human speak is arguably more important than the technology itself sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when I was a developer, I always loved reviewing other people's code. Like, oh, you're so cool. Like the way you figured this out is so cool. I wish I could do this by myself. And it like I can translate it all day. The problem is I really can't write it myself. So I think I found my
Yeah,
calling and the place where I need to be.
it's worked out very well for you, obviously. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, thank you.
In today's episode, we're going to be jumping into the World Cup. So World Cup, we're in the semifinals now, but when it began, right, it's 48 teams, 104 matches, 16 cities, 3 nations, 5 million plus fans, all squeezed into like a 39-day window. And what's funny is like when I was coming up with the questions for this episode, most of my shows, we spend the time talking about like keeping attackers out. And today is what like happens when they're already in, right?
Yeah.
And it's really cool because this is the first World Cup across 3 nations. And we're running through this like cross-border digital infrastructure, unlike anything in a previous tournament. And not to mention the accreditation systems, the ticketing platforms, Intel, logistics, like name it. And this tournament has it. Now that this is all kind of like interconnected attack surface and FBI is reporting that it is under real fire. There's a bunch happening in the cyber domain through this tournament. From your vantage point, what do you think like the highest consequence failure points are? And then when the systems, like when there's an outage, it stops being an IT problem and really becomes like an operational nightmare. So from your vantage point, what do you think those highest consequences are?
It's so interesting to me because when you think about attacks and attack vectors, early days, even before like real cyber attacks started happening, you had the Nigerian prince schemes in email and like, it's not a cyber attack, but it was a form of using technology to sort of infiltrate, influence, and mislead someone into giving up information, which leads to theft or some kind of, damage and attack. The principle hasn't changed, right? Like it's a theory as old as like piracy, but like how do I infiltrate a system to get something out of it? And the real thing that scares me about specifically the World Cup, because it is in 3 different countries, which all follow, different sort of technical cybersecurity legislation, regulation. It is something that where there are different stadiums, different locations, different states. There are so many ways this can go wrong. And that's just factoring the locations, right?
Yeah.
Then you have to consider how many people are there. Coaches, trainers, the guy who, mows the lawn, like all of them are endpoints in a much larger sort of cyber connected location. Each one of them can be a failure that leads to a much larger breach or dwell phase that could spring itself at any time during this event. I think like the craziest thing to me is it's such a big event from both a geographical as well as a person and a cost perspective that it's no wonder cyber attackers are looking to take any advantage they can because really all it takes is just the tiniest little crack. And then suddenly you have access to a lot of information and a lot of sway to sort of make demands with that information.
Yeah, and that's been really interesting because that geographic location standpoint, you're absolutely correct. Because like Mexico does have national regulations, right, that they abide
Mhm.
by, but then you come to the United States and we don't practice that as much. We don't
Right.
have anything currently. So it does create kind of that rift and where's the handoff line of like, hey, this is a Mexico, is it a Mexico problem? Is it a United States problem? Or is it a FIFA problem? And what we've seen so far that I found really interesting was really a very coordinated international effort through some of the soccer powerhouse countries with DHS, FBI, all these different kind of government agencies, as well as FIFA, where they took down tens of thousands of FIFA spoof domains. And it goes back to your Nigerian prince adage of like
Right.
that they were setting up legitimate streaming through spoof domains. And then once the customer or victim in this case would register, then they're compromised and they're spreading malware. So you're absolutely right. Like it hasn't changed.
I mean, even yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about the spoof domain side, but like, if I was a criminal and I had access to the World Cup, I would literally just bring like a fake router, right? Like,
Yeah,
and just set it up in the audience and look like a legit Wi-Fi point. And how many people can you get that way, right? Like,
absolutely.
it's it is truly fishing with the largest net possible, and we've just put all these people in these very singular locations that were not designed to be cybersecurity hubs in any way, shape, or form, and basically said like, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, 100%. And then you think about how much those tickets go for, you're getting access to high valued individuals and their
Right.
information. So, yeah, that's a really good
in
point.
in prepping for this, like I was just thinking about like, some of the ways this could go wrong. And it kind of shocked me because we see so many businesses get hit, but we
Yes.
haven't really seen like a high profile football player get hit or like a celebrity get hit. And there's
Yep.
both of these and attendance, right? Like I think this could be one of the first times we see it happen, or it will be a gateway into seeing things like this happen. And obviously it's harder because when it's an individual that's being attacked, right? Like if, Messi is
Yeah.
spoofed, if they get his information and threaten him, like say, you got to pay me this much money or else I'm going to release this to the world. He's not going to disclose that, right?
No.
Like he doesn't have to. Where businesses, they're incentivized by FBI, local law enforcement, like, hey, you should tell us what's going on. Like if you got the money and you have the ability to handle this behind the scenes, you probably will. So
Yes.
there could be things occurring right now we don't know about that are just being handled behind the scenes, which is still bad because that means the criminals are winning and they're getting
E-
what they want. And it's stopping us from being able to think about how we prevent these kind of attacks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's been my biggest struggle with doing cybersecurity research. And we talked a little bit about this in the sports industry is there's not a lot of disclosure.
Yeah.
And it's very rare disclosure happens until it's already too late where like Homeland Security or FBI is involved, some kind of government agency to come in and provide that cyber support. But it's just been very difficult. And as players, I do wonder in the NIL, like college space moving from the World Cup a little bit, but like
Right. Right.
you have to create an LLC to get this money most of the time. And once you're a
Hmm.
business, you will have to disclose. And I wonder how that changes the dynamics a little bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, great point.
Yeah,
But
it's super interesting, and it's crime one on,
yeah,
but it's such a scale, right? Like it really is kind of fishing with dynamite. So I'm very curious what we hear after the fact if anything occurred.
yeah, for the biggest fish too, right? Like these aren't
Hmm.
your mom and pop small businesses.
Yeah,
No disrespect to them, but like these
the
athletes
most well paid
pull.
athletes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And we kind of touched on question 2 a bit here, and it's good that we've done that. It's a natural segue into how really threat intelligence analysts predicted this would all materialize. And it kind of goes into exactly what you were describing of how large this event is. And we have seen I would call them adjacent World Cup businesses be targeted by DDoS
hmm,
activity, hospitality providers, and then actually this morning, it was revealed the Argentina Football Association, so Messi's team,
yeah.
had their entirety of their business email domain compromised and sent
Oh
out
no.
messages to all the players and sponsors and vendors saying that Egypt was unfairly refereed in that game and that Argentina deserves to lose and that they have everybody's credentials and private information. So exactly what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But how do, and I guess this is a good segue into it, how do organizations responsible for this event infrastructure distinguish between more opportunist criminal activity and then more targeted strategic attacks?
It's so difficult. But I think the first thing that really anyone, whether you're a high paid athlete, a team owner, or the mom and pop shop, it comes down to just training and awareness is step
Mm,
one, right? Because like I think a big miss on a lot of people's parts is that they don't even acknowledge that something like this could happen. So they're not in the headspace of thinking, is this real? What I'm seeing on my phone right now? Like I got my email app open, like this looks like a legitimate email. Is this, like what does this mean? Right? Like, how does this impact me? And we talk about when we do our own phishing and cybersecurity training and tech companies, it's like, well, if there's urgency behind the message, if there's spelling errors, if it's got fishy links, you're probably safe. They don't have anything. They're phishing for you to do that. We go through the basic phishing training. I don't know enough about this email domain spoof and what they got access to, but I have to imagine just a little bit of cybersecurity training could have probably prevented some panic
yeah.
and maybe some folks from actually clicking or tapping on those links, which who knows what they got out of that, those taps and the information downstream. But it always starts with knowledge, right? Just knowing what's out there and what can be done. Like, yeah, do we need to train every soccer player on cybersecurity 400 level course? No, but I think bare essentials is great just for humanity as a whole, right?
Yeah.
It's a good starting point.
And I think that that 100 level will help because in the do line from whoever this email spoof, whoever conducted it, it was the head coach of Egypt that sent the email, right? And it's like, hey,
Right.
I know they wouldn't have access to this. So you're absolutely right. And I do find it interesting because that I think people hear cybersecurity and they get a little afraid sometimes, right? When you talk about
Yeah.
cybersecurity training, they're like, oh, I don't know any of this. And it's really like, hey, just normal hygiene efforts of, like we've talked about it on the show before. We've had athletes compromised because they kept their passwords in like a note file or they have the same password across things, right? So I couldn't agree more with your line of thinking there of like, hey, we could stop the forest from catching fire if we just focus on some of the fundamentals here.
And that's I think that's the key to really solving this because it is a pandemic. It is like we have a
Yeah.
cyber pandemic that is global. If I can teach my parents some basic cybersecurity 101 and get them on board and they are able to be like, hey son, I was able to I caught one. It's like, oh good dad. Like
Yeah.
if we can do it with our parents, I think we can expect the same level of basic training and just cyber awareness for athletes, coaches, team owners. It's not a ridiculous expectation that they're going to be taken advantage of because they're such a big target and they are going to pay, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think it does need to become something that just worldwide, in the States, you get a driver's license if you want to drive a
Yeah.
car. I don't think it's so ridiculous to say like, hey, if you're going to be a high profile online individual, then you need to go through some basic cybersecurity training and awareness. Understand the
Yeah.
concept of zero trust because that can benefit you tremendously and prevent a lot of stress and heartache when they get in or stop them from getting in.
100%. And especially when the brands that sponsor them to make these posts online
Yes.
and the teams invest so much money into them, they're a walking business asset. And
Right.
yeah, it's just rough. So talking about some of those attack vectors and attack exploits, ransomware seems to
Right.
be all the rage for the last 2 years. I feel like every week, if not every other day, I see a large industry completely locked out of their accounts by ransomware or has to shut down production for a while. But in a global event like this, negotiating with attackers nor rebuilding from scratch is really operationally feasible because of the timelines. What does a realistic tested recovery path look like for an organization operating under that constraint? And then what do you think separates organizations that survive that scenario and those that don't?
It's a two-step process. And I think people often skip the first step to jump right to the second. So I want to really dig into this, but preparation is everything, right? I'm a big believer in zero trust. The core tenet of zero trust is assume breach. If you
Yeah.
assume they're already in your systems, that gives you such a better mindset for how you're going to deal with this because you start to look at things like, wait a second, if my Outlook system is compromised, then everything is compromised because it's all tied to the same ecosystem. That's bad. So with zero trust mindset, like you start, okay, if they're in there and they have access to Outlook, what else do they have access to? If they have access to our key customer database, what else do they have access to? You look at it from that lens and you start to evaluate, how can I split this up? How can I separate things, maybe make some of these systems a little more secure, segment access, just kind of, parse and parcel this out. So if one thing is breached and completely taken down, we don't lose everything. And that preparation phase is important because when you do that, you also get the idea and you can run through test exercises of, okay, when this does break, because it will,
Yep.
everything will be compromised either through a day zero or clever hack attack, whatever, it will fail. You run to the exercise of bringing it back. And that leads into point two, which I think is what people are looking at now, but it's so much easier if you do the prep work first, is having a really good point of recovery. Now, we at Object First, we tout a phrase called absolute immutability, which basically means no vendor, admin, attacker, AI with, God mode turned on can change the data once it is written to a storage target. So the device that we sell and produce actually delivers on this promise of absolute immutability. Any piece of data that lands on our box is kept immutable for whatever time window that is set on it. And the cool thing about it is it's so locked down that we can't even go in and change that data if we wanted to, right? And that's the core concept, right? Zero access for any kind of destruction actions to be taken on the firmware, the operating system, storage later, data later. I bring this up because if you're just taking backups or if you're just doing, replication site to site and something goes wrong, hey, we're going to fail over. All you've done is failed over the ransomware to a secondary
Yeah.
location. You're helping spread it effectively. It's what it wants. But when you have a solid backup strategy with a system that cannot be compromised and you've gone through that prep work, then it becomes very easy. Hey, we've got a problem. We've lost this core database. It's the only thing that was lost. We have a good backup of it. We're going to pull it back in there. We're going to make sure we don't bring back the ransomware with it. And we're able to recover that in a matter of, hours or minutes, depending on how big it is. But that's sort of the scenario you want to create for yourself. But it really is sort of a 1-2 punch. You've got to prepare. You have to analyze and evaluate and practice and understand that things will fail. And then you have to have a point to bring things back from. And we can absolutely help with the second half of that. But the first
Yeah.
half is a mentality swap that has to occur.
And I love that because it's so methodical. If you do number
Right.
one, hey, we're gonna rip apart, because everybody already does to an extent in the business world of like ITILs and all of this great thing where you break
Yes.
down your business processes looking for efficiencies. So
Mm,
I would say almost 50% of the homework's already done for you if you do that in your company. And now it's just applying the data portion to it. And then
right.
it seems like at Object First, you've taken that from a customer standpoint and applied it to yourself as well as like, hey, we shouldn't be able to access this data in case we all get compromised. I mean, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. We actually had one of our customers, early days. This is 2 years into our operation. So even before we were acquired by Veeam, they were a school district. They were hit by ransomware on a Saturday, of course, right? Like
Oh,
that's when schools
yep.
get hit, is on Saturday. So
Yep.
they freak out. They come in. They're like, we have no access to anything. FBI gets involved. They show up. They're looking around the data center and they see our box in there, and it's got this big orange bezel on it. They're like, well, what is that? As they're looking through everything, they're like, that's our Object First box. And like, that is currently the only thing that is still functioning in your environment. It's considered evidence now, but can you recover from that? And they were able to. And that's
Wow.
sort of the testament to having that level of absolute immutability in your backup data. Because if we can't kill it, the ransomware can't kill it, and you're going to
Yep.
be able to get back. And we actually had the gentleman who was responsible for this come and tell his story on stage. And he was getting like teary eyed because he's like, I was worried for my job. And
Yeah.
this box effectively, saved the school. Everyone was able to come back to school that next Thursday when they were able to get the recovery in. And, it makes a difference when you have that prep and you've taken the time to really consider, I will get hacked. It's not a matter of if, but when. And, to bring things back to the World Cup and the sporting world situation, I think a lot of these folks, they're not, I always say IT is kind of it's the third child, right? Like no one's really, well, it'll take, those IT nerds will take care of it, right? That's always the
Yep.
assumption. I was there, right? You don't get the budget. You don't get the leadership
Nope.
looking at you saying like, yeah, no, we're going to feed you guys this quarter. It's like, no, figure it out, be scrappy.
100%.
But when you change that lens and you actually look at your IT department as they're the guys who are keeping our entire business afloat, like They're the oil that greases our gears. You give them some attention, you give them some budget, they're able to build something that will ensure, hey, if we are hacked, we'll be back up and running in an hour. We've tested this, we've proven this, we've done our training, we've done our run books. That can make a huge difference. And
And
it can really help the public perception of you as well.
yeah, oh yeah, 100%. And I find it interesting in the sports industry because we think, the World Cup, yeah, we probably planned about a year. I think I started seeing reports come out about a year before the tournament. And oftentimes I think like that's not a lot of time to get your team jived and synced and rolling, the way it should be. So I think
Mhm.
practicing, like you're saying, that practice piece is so important. And I would think from a sports organization, they would want to practice, like that's part of the gig. But
Yeah. Athletes
and
train, they practice.
yeah, and one thing I wrote down when I was reading about Object First, and I'm reading about, some of just to me with ransomware, it's always interesting. And what I wrote down is essentially what we talked about with not practicing was an untested backup isn't a recovery plan. It's hope with a storage bill. And that's
Yes.
essentially,
Yes.
yeah. But
100%.
yeah, I was just like, wow, and it's great to see some of those innovations by companies like yours because it does change the dynamic for how we're combating cybersecurity
Right.
problems or attack vectors, if you will, right? Like, okay, we understand that front line, the identity portion is most likely always going to be the first one in trouble, but how do we stop
Right.
them from getting crown jewels? Or if they get crown jewels, can we also get them back with not having to pay
Mhm.
$1 million or whatever the case may be? Gosh, just yeah, fascinating. All right.
I know.
Yeah. So as we move forward, the US venues are operating right now, like we just talked about, kind of that patchwork. We have a year to prepare. We have local, federal, and international frameworks all being applied simultaneously. From an incident response standpoint, how do you think jurisdictional like complexity affects an organization's ability to move quickly? And it kind of goes back to that practicing. Like, if we're not used to sharing all of that data, what coordination gaps can still be closed, I guess, in the 2 weeks that we have remaining versus what you think probably could have been focused on months before we started the tournament?
It's funny. I never even considered the sort of business side of things. You brought it up earlier. Hey, we do all these business sort of slices. Where's our optimization? Where's our opportunity to make more money? How do we operate as efficiently and cost effectively as possible? Taking that and applying it to your IT team is a brilliant idea. I love that. I think that's I'm going to steal that my
Do it,
future
please.
talks and conversation because it's great, right? Like you already are like someone in your organization is looking at your business from a cost optimization perspective. That is a great first look at your IT spend and sort of layout, right? Because you're supporting all of this with technology. So that's your first look, right? Get an understanding. What do you got? Where it's at? How much does it cost? And what would it look like if any of those pieces went down at any time? The regulation side of thing always scares the heck out of me because
Yeah.
the last thing anyone wants in their job is more red tape, right? Like we saw this in Europe. NIS2 came out and it just $1 million fines. I don't know who got fined or for what.
Yep.
But when I read that regulation and it was freaking long, you're just
Yep.
going through like all the different requirements that a business has to meet and what a business is defined as and like how much they could be fined for their definition. And if they don't meet these specific requirements, it made me happy again, not to be in the IT side of business because it sounds like a nightmare to have to fix. So I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but if you can get early insight into what
Yeah.
these regulations are, if you can start to plan today, and I think there are going to be some pretty obvious things that anyone can look at and go take action on. One of which is, what does CISA say?
Yeah.
If you look at the things that CISA is putting out there, they have their secure by design pledge. Object First signed this. We went through the practice already of sort of executing their 8 steps to make sure that we are following their best practices. Look at organizations like CISA, NIST. Look at what Europe did with NIST 2. It's going to give you a good idea of where likely regulations are going to be. They're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just catching up.
No.
So start with what already exists. Make sure you're following those best practices and you're implementing them. Obviously, with what remains of the World Cup event, I think the best thing anyone can do right now today is just think zero trust, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're in IT, if you've never thought, hey, I'm managing just the local network for the stadium and it's World Cup time. Like, what about your network policies could be more secure? I just spent a week fixing up my home network and just
Yeah.
breaking things into subnets, creating various levels of firewalls and accesses that my different Wi-Fi's could talk to or not talk to. If I could do it on my home network, you can absolutely do it on your stadium network with a stadium level budget. So think about segmentation. Think about least privilege access and who should have access to what. These are things you can go and do right now. Because I could go do it on my network right now, right?
Yep.
So I think it's all about taking that first step and looking at, well, if I assume breach, if I assume something's gone wrong, how can I go and segment, slice, fix that thing in that small little bit? And then you just take that mentality and you apply it across your entire IT infrastructure, and you'll be in a much better situation than you are right now.
Yeah, and then they could take the fact that the World Cup is happening and use that as like a need to increase budget and like all
Right.
this good stuff,
Yeah.
like take
Let's not
advantage of
have
it.
egg on our face in front of the entire
Yeah.
world.
I heard somebody say the other day is never let the opportunity presented by a good crisis to go to waste. And I was like,
That's
"Oh,
a
okay, well, fair."
great quote.
Yeah, as we get into this last part, we're gonna get a little bit more forward leaning, I would say. So kind of like never let a good crisis go to waste. Every major global sporting event is going to yield a lesson. And we've seen this happen time and time again, where security professionals swear, "Oh, that will never happen again." And we'll get after it on the next one, and we'll do our best. But here we are mid tournament, and we're watching again the same categories, like you just said. We could go way back and see that the method of attack hasn't really changed that much. But what does the sport and event industry do you think we're constantly looking for improvement about protecting itself? And with LA 2028 just 2 years out, what would a genuinely proactive security posture look like for the next global event on US soil?
So I'm gonna choose my words carefully here. So I don't want to offend anybody, but I think there is, especially in IT, I think just in the industry writ large, we are seeing a mass adoption of AI,
Mm,
both local and remote, right? And there's a lot of real good that can come from the implementation of AI inside of an organization and ecosystem. What I don't see as much is good training going along
yeah.
with it. And what I do see is an increase in AI powered cyber attacks. We're seeing it more and more every week. You can just
Yeah.
do a quick little news search, AI powered cyber attack. There's another one, and they're
Yep.
getting better. Here's the thing. If you're using AI as a crutch instead of as a tool, you are creating new gaps and new ways for AI powered cyber attacks to get in. Because if
Yeah.
you're not thinking about it and you're just trusting the machine to make the right decision for you, you've already lost the game. So my big fear is with these future events as we begin to adopt AI more and more, larger and larger infrastructures and ecosystems work them in. If you're doing the training, if you're considering it the right way, it's going to be such a boon to your business. You're going to be so much more efficient. You're going to be so much more sort of able to pivot, do things quicker. However, if you're not considering the security implications of these technologies and how much access you give them, they can actually become the weakest point of your infrastructure. So my advice to everybody would be like, hey, yeah, go nuts on your AI strategy, but make sure with every step you take a following step with your security policies and make sure you're not giving it too much access. And you're considering, what if this was used against me? Like, what does it have access to that if somehow it was compromised or another AI got in and was able to communicate with it, that what would it give up? Right. And it's a scary thought to think because we have seen AIs communicate good and
Yep.
bad, and they can take advantage of each other. This is the world we're moving into. Like, it's not Terminator, but it's almost war games. So like
Yeah.
it's you gotta be careful.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was reading a report, I think it was last month or the month before, where they said the browser has become like the largest attack vector. And I was like, what? Okay, let me play with this and look
Yeah.
into it. And it's essentially a whole bunch of ungoverned businesses using ungoverned AI platforms, and they're dumping exactly what you said, whether it's contract negotiations, medical records, like they're putting it all in there and not understanding that hey, this wasn't sanctioned by our company. This isn't in a
Right.
silo. We have a real problem here. I love
Like
that.
I didn't even think about that vector. Is I'm just feeding, Claude, our customer database, to have it do some optimizations, but
Yeah.
it's not a team instance. It's not protected under our, any of our security or data policies. Just doing it for
Just
funsies,
doing it.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's terrifying.
Yeah. But we appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you would like to discuss before we end it?
I've actually I wrote a pretty cool paper on sort of the steps you take pre, during, and post a ransomware attack. You can get it on our website. I would love to encourage your listeners. Hey, if you anything I said today seemed like, hey, I might want to know more about that. That paper's a great place to start. We also have, and neither of these are product focused. So I would just throw that out there. Like, if you're not going to get sold a product if you download our paper, we also have one on what absolute immutability actually is. So if you have backups and you're thinking about, is my backup going to withstand the attack? Check our checklist out. Look up our paper on absolute immutability and see where you fit on the survivor scale, and make sure that you can survive that attack, because when the backups are gone, that's it. You've basically
Yeah.
lost everything.
Yeah. And I'll make sure we share that through all of our platforms as well. Cause to me, those are great resources to have. And then for the
Yeah.
cybersecurity professionals, right? Like, I don't think we think of backups all the time. I think we're thinking about stopping the attack
Yeah.
and doing XYZ. So I think it'll be great material for them as well to sift through and analyze. So that way, when they're building their infrastructure and architecture, they can be like, "Hey, time out. I know something. I know a different tool we can use to make sure our company stays online."
It's
But
funny. I'll give you one more quick
yeah,
anecdote. I've been going to RSA for 4 years now, and the first year I went there, they were like, "What the heck are you doing here? You're a backup storage company." Second year, they're like, "Okay, you're still here. I guess I see what you're doing here." And like, people would just come and be like, "Why are you here?" Now, this year, there's backup companies and storage companies everywhere, because it has just become ingrained in the cybersecurity conversation. So it's like real history
I
we're
love it.
living through. Backup is
Yep.
part of the cybersecurity world now, whether we like it or not, but it's going to be that
Yeah,
last line of defense and everything fails.
what do they call it, from end to end? You need to understand, like, hey,
That's right.
you get this defense in depth thing is real. It's no longer just like a firewall, a router. Like, no, it's got to be buttoned up all the way. So
Exactly.
I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. We're gonna take our conversation here, and I have two more follow-on episodes I'm doing about the World Cup. So this is a great foundation for all the listeners, and continue to listen to learn more about the cybersecurity insights being pulled from the World Cup. So thank you again, Anthony, so much.
Thanks, Travis.